So hello, welcome to our first exciting podcast where we're going to be talking to Shelley and Lily from Harvey Nash, who are going to be talking us about their experiences with returning back to work, but also how their organisation supports their working parents. So let them introduce themselves and their roles. Shelley, do you want to start us off?
Perfect. Okay, so I'm Shelley Hawkins. I am the HR director for Nash Tech, which is a company that's part of Nash Squared, which is our group company.
Thank you. And Lily?
Hi, I'm Lily Hake. I have a leading role in our executive search practice in the UK. So I am a headhunter effectively. I recruit very senior technology leaders all over the world, and I manage a team that does that as well.
So we just want to ask you and start off with the first question. In your experience, what do you think are the biggest challenges that working parents face in your organisation?
I can start. I know that one big challenge is around educating managers. I was speaking to our chief people officer the other day, and she definitely said there's definitely, I would say that your experience being a parent in any organisation going through pregnancy and returning to work, I'm sure it's going to vary so much according to who your manager is. Whether they have experience being a parent themselves, whether they, I guess, are some are just more emotionally switched on, and some might be very conscientious but really feel a little bit daunted by the whole thing, and they don't know what questions to ask. So I believe Nash Squared is working on a sort of guidance pack for managers, rolling that out so that I guess the experience is standardised, that everyone, manager, you have a cheat sheet, right? You know what questions you should be asking, what sort of things.
Yeah. And I think you're right where you're talking about kind of depending on who your manager is. And I think that is something that has to change because everyone should have an equal experience. And I think that's what the most difficult challenge is, that there appears, and we've kind of been speaking to a lot of working parents, that some have a really good experience of it, especially when they say, oh yeah, my manager's great, they've been through it, they understand, or where other people say, well, no, my manager doesn't get it at all, and for whatever reason. And that, I think, is brilliant that you're trying to get that thing standardised, that everyone is kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. Definitely. Have you kind of recognised any cultural shifts perhaps in the workplace regarding working parents over the last, I know obviously the last 2 years have been a very different kind of time frame in work regarding and everything and flexibility, but do you think there's been a better cultural shift with everything that's trying to kind of go on fighting for this type of change? Shelley, what do you think?
I think so, definitely. I think it's more visible, the challenges now that working parents face, and I hope it's more acceptable to talk about them. I think we're all more open about it. I think there have been some positive things that have come about as a result of the pandemic, if we can find a positive, in that it has opened up this world of working from home, and it has shown that actually flexibility is a really good thing. We can accommodate that in many roles and in many parts of the business really easily, and that allows people to be more present for their families, which is fabulous and something that we obviously want to accommodate. I also think, I hope, certainly from anecdotal experience, fathers are even more involved in childcare or more open about talking about that. That's certainly been my experience since I've been in Nash Tech.
I think that there's so many people previously that shied away from saying, oh, I need to go and pick up, or I need to, I'm sorry, I'm going to be 20 minutes late today, so I need to drop off, or what have you. And I think that over the last couple of years, that's certainly changed. It certainly seems to be changing. As you said, a lot more people are open about it. And I think that's kind of the key to change, isn't it? And if everybody speaks about it and is open about their experience, and everybody else can say, oh, yes, actually, I feel the same. And that's when you can suddenly start to see change, because managers and companies realise that actually this is now not just affecting a few people, but that's actually affecting everyone.
Absolutely.
I think the flexibility thing is definitely the attitudes change. Or certainly in my own household, I think if my kids had walked in on my husband 4 or 5 years ago on a work call, it would have been a very much, I can't, what, you know, why are they coming, you know, whereas now it's almost like, I remember them walking in, obviously saying something completely inappropriate, and it was almost like everyone just it's not embarrassing anymore because, you know.
I think that's also interesting and a positive too, in that while, and there are varying debates about this, while we're not all in the office together, so arguably we're less connected, actually that being at home and seeing someone's family or dog or child brings you closer to them as well in a way.
Absolutely, because you actually are knowing the person rather than just...
Indeed,
yeah.
Very humanizing, isn't it? Seeing someone's cat crawl over their keyboard.
It makes it makes you feel you're not, you know how obviously in, you know, some workplaces, you know, you might not put on an act, but you go into a presentation, you're very corporate, and you kind of don't have that relaxed way. You're almost forced to do that, and I think that sometimes makes a more natural kind of situation, doesn't it, really? But I think one of the things that we've talked about with other people is that the flexible working, and obviously you can tell us in your opinions, hasn't necessarily fixed the problem of kind of working and being a parent, because, and some organisations feel that it has fixed that. Now, oh great, you can work from home, that's fine. But actually we were saying that kind of shutting your laptop and then going straight to being a parent, rather than having that commute or having that time of where you wind down and you kind of transfer your roles almost, that in itself could be quite tricky. Have you experienced that at all?
I think absolutely, and I think the key here is the discipline, right? Is that delineation between work and home life. If you really can work anywhere at any time, which should be an amazing thing, but where's the delineation, right? When do you say, right, enough is enough, I'm not going to answer emails anymore, I'm going to be mum now? It's a really tough thing to do, and I would say that almost businesses have a responsibility to hold their employees to account and say, right, now is you time, please don't be answering emails at 8 p.m. just because you can, just because we've proven you can work anywhere. Make sure you've got that work-life balance.
Yeah, so it's an interesting, isn't it, that you think that things are getting better, but it might actually then, the expectation on yourself is that you don't have so much of a structure of a working day because you are at home. So
I think a lot of working parents feel that guilt element, you know, I've had to leave at 5 o'clock, or I've had to do the pickup or whatever, so therefore I must now give you my soul for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. And I think Lily's right. I think there's a responsibility on employers, on managers, to reinforce what we say, to reinforce that message of, no, do you know, this is your time for your family now. Thank you for responding to that email, but actually I don't need you to.
God, the guilt is just perennial, isn't it? I should have said this at the start. So I'm 3 weeks back to work, having had my son. So I had a year of maternity leave, and I've just come back to Harvey Nash. And I mean, there's absolutely no one in the organisation making me feel this. This is an internalised thing. But so maybe clock off at 4:45 to go and pick up my son from nursery. Horrendous guilt. How dare I leave my desk at 4:45 to go and get my son? But then you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because I arrive at nursery and my son's one of only 3 babies left, because all the other mums, much better mums than I am, have gone and collected their children already. And then I feel horrible guilt for not spending too much time with him. So, you know, it's really, really hard.
Trying to balance mum guilt and work guilt is quite...
and then my tiny head explodes, And
unfortunately, our kids are like 5 and 7, and that guilt is still there.
Oh gosh, I was hoping it would get better.
Bad way, but it's always something, you know. That's when they talk back at you and say, "Why am I the last one of the 3 here?" Rather than, you know. But it you know, unfortunately, that's always an issue, isn't it? That balancing act. And I think once the cultural shift is starting to change, then I think that it becomes more of a norm, rather than you feeling that you're being compared to people who might finish at 3 or finish at 4. And I think that so many different countries do it different ways. We were talking to someone the other day from America, and they were saying that like the parental leave there is literally a few weeks,
3 weeks, and then that was it.
And there, for us, when we say, oh, we feel guilty about going back after a year, it's completely alien to them. So it's an interesting, like, kind of different viewpoint on and how different countries do it globally.
On that different country element, Nash Tech operates globally, and the time zone, different time zone element of that is interesting for us as well. You've got a more narrow window to talk to some countries, and it coincides with a drop-off time, so we have to think about that. But then also there are other countries that occasionally our colleagues need to attend calls later in the day, and actually it works very well for them in terms of spending time with their family earlier in the day. So swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've spoken to lots of different organisations, but how do Harvey Nash support their employees? Because we know that there are so many different ways that you support them. But do you want to talk us through some of the ways?
Sure, yeah. It's Nash Squared. We've very recently changed branding, so I'm making sure I'm on message. Where the group company is Nash Squared. So we've recently enhanced both our maternity and paternity policies in terms of our financial offering. We've also started working with yourselves around support for employees transitioning to and from a period of leave. We try to educate and encourage managers as much as possible, supported by HR, on flexibility, both formally and otherwise, when parents and carers make requests. But I think we recognise that there's more to do, and the next step for us is looking at how we can do that, how we can keep pace with the needs of parents today, whether that's enhanced financial offering, whether that's more support, or whether that's education from managers. When we started, and Lily made a good point about the experience not being consistent. And I think you can, and we are, put guidance packs out there for managers, a cheat sheet, if you like, so that some commonly asked questions or common issues have answers or have guidance for them. But it's easy to just assume that everyone's going to read that. And actually, we as HR, we as senior exec need to constantly reinforce and point people towards those. To make sure that it isn't just your experience isn't dependent on you having a manager who is a mum or a dad or whomever.
I guess I can speak to my own experience in terms of how I do work for Harvey Nash, not Nash Squared, how they have supported me. I guess my own experience, my pregnancy was quite complicated. So literally from the very, very start, I was having from the third trimester, I was having twice weekly scans, and I guess the business couldn't have done enough. Each manager or my peers could not have done enough to make sure that I never felt that I needed to be working when I couldn't. My maternity leave started early because my son was here 3 weeks early. So again, they moved all sorts of things to make sure that was really easy transition for me. Lovely little things, I guess, that when my son was here, we got flowers and a little outfit for baby Dylan. And then again, maybe this speaks to my manager's approach rather than a policy or anything, but I had really, really regular check-ins, even just little texts and WhatsApps asking me how I was doing. She, one thing she really did was be very, very, she was really trying to make me feel that my job would be there when I got back, right? So she was making sure she didn't make any decisions without me, or if there were major decisions, that she was bringing me into the fold and asking my opinion. Everything was set up so that when I came back, I felt like I was going back to the job that I had before, and everything I had worked for was still going to be there for me when I got back. And then I've only been back 3 weeks, but it's been absolutely lovely. I mean, one thing that has been great is I've had diarised meetings with a load of peers and senior people in the business to reintroduce myself. So there's been a lot of change. There's a few new hires, lots of people moving roles. And it's just been really lovely to understand the landscape of the business again. And I think the lovely knock-on effect of that is it's probably helped in some way to address my imposter syndrome, because having to introduce yourself and remind yourself, okay, this is my career to date, this is what I'm responsible for now, reminding yourself, okay, I actually can do my job and I have got an impactful role in the business and I'm going to explain that all now, has been a really nice experience. So I mean, there's a few examples.
So nice
so
to
excellent.
hear.
Yeah, so lovely to hear that you have such a lovely supporting company, but also really easy seems to be like a really easy transition back into the workplace, which is lovely because so many people find that bit really, really challenging.
So far so good, and to say that I'm working from home 2 to 3 days a week, it's been seamless. Yeah.
We've had 2 employees, one just gone and one about to go off on maternity leave in Nash Tech, so we threw them a joint shower on Monday, which was lovely. And we involved both of them in the hire of their maternity cover, which I think is also really important. Kind of debunks any feelings they might have of how that person is being brought into the organisation, helps them to feel involved and helps them to feel reassured about what will happen to their workload while they're off, making sure that they have a say in who we hire in and how that work is organised as well, I think is really important.
It's brilliant because we talk to quite a few people in different organisations, and you are way ahead of what other people are doing, which is nice to hear. And obviously we work with Harvey Nash now as an organisation. We didn't get to help or speak to you, Lily, obviously while you were off, but it sounds like your transition and everything is really has been really smooth. And whenever we've spoken to any kind of people, when we've been looking at working with you guys, they didn't bring us in because they weren't doing anything. That was the one thing that we liked about working with your organisation, is because you're already doing things already, and it just fitted in really nicely, but just enhanced it. And they obviously want to keep moving forward to make it better and better.
Yeah.
And keep, like the good employees that they want to keep, because it shouldn't be this constant like fight in 2 different worlds. The 2 worlds, as you say, should merge, and being involved in that process from early on, I think, is really important, especially
I think
you and stuff.
You miss so much talent if you aren't thinking like that, if you aren't being flexible. So it's really important to us. I think also communication and openness is really key, and remembering that everybody's experience, yes, there are some common themes and there are some ways in which we can help people around those, but everybody's experience of being a parent is different, and everybody's support network around them is different, and actually that also changes throughout the cycle of your child. So what you need or what you can do when your baby is 1 or 2 is different, and the demands are different to when you've got children of 5 or 7 like you both have. And it's remembering that and making sure that dialogue is continuous, I think.
Yes, it's true actually, because in a way when they're younger it's almost easier because nurseries are more round the clock. You can drop them at 7 and pick them up at 7.
I don't have to think about a pickup time, but
is suddenly things change again. So you're right, so it's all about the company realizing that different stages you need to have different levels.
And I was talking to a member of our exec recently around her children are older, around the emotional needs that children have as they're older, and the demands that places on you as a parent, which again is different to when you've got a 9-month-old or a 2-year-old.
My mum always used to say to me, as the children get bigger, they need you more.
That's scary. It's not scary.
No, but as it is,
don't frighten me.
It's interesting that actually I see that now, with my 8-year-old son and my 5-year-old daughter. I can see that actually they need you more, but in different ways.
You can't organise them as easily as you can when they're babies, because you go
they don't stay where they're put, I guess.
Exactly. You're going here. It's like, oh, I finished early today. Oh, great. Yeah,
another inset.
Yeah, like get a whole week off, but then you have an inset tomorrow. Yay. So it's just kind of there's, as you say, there's different stages throughout, and you have to keep looking, as you said, forward. You can't be complacent into thinking, oh yeah, we've got that, because from an HR point of view, when we're speaking to people in other organisations, some people have said that what their experience is that the HR will do what is legally required of them often. For example, going through that document and telling them when their pay goes, and that's what legally they have to do, but people, and we were speaking to someone in HR who said he's never thought about it in any other capacity. Like, that's what they do. They've never thought anything more than that. And I think when companies like yourselves are doing that, I hope that more and more will kind of follow suit, because it's actually quite frightening how you are expected sometimes just to go back to work like you never left
and get on with it.
Nothing changed, and so much has changed.
I think what I'd like to see us do, and we are, as I said, going through this at the moment in terms of thinking of the next steps and an accelerated offering for us. I'm thrilled to hear of the positive experience that Lily has had on transitioning back in. Really glad, and I hope everyone also feels that way when coming back into Nash Tech or Nash Squared or Harvey Nash. For me, the danger time was actually maybe at the 6-month point, or the 9-month point, where you've managed to transition back in, and there were days where I felt like Superwoman. I've got this covered, I can do it, no problem. But then the reality of every day feeling like you're dividing your time, and you've done that welcome back into the office, reintroduce yourself, reintegrate yourself. And I think thinking about the support that we could or should offer to parents at that point, at that 6-month point, or maybe at that year point, would be really interesting to do.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting point, and I think there is a little bit of me that feels like, okay, I get a bit of a pass. I'm sort of winding my way up back to the full capacity that I was at before I left. Haven't really let myself think about how I'm going to feel in 9 months' time, when at least my own expectation of myself is that I'm flying and working at absolute full capacity. Yeah.
And it is different for different people. And actually, some people, that beginning bit, I think, is the hardest, and you get through that and you will be fine and you won't need anything else. But yeah, for others, I think it would be interesting to think about how we could intervene or help support if needed.
Well, you certainly seem to be leading the way on supporting working parents, which is amazing, and I hope that other companies, as we said before, kind of start to follow suit.
I was going to say, we talked about imposter syndrome, and for us that is something that we are massively developing in our own company to try and not ourselves but to try and develop the transition back into the workplace as a kind of endpoint to our support after the year, because we found that is a real area where people lack of confidence. But not only that, almost, it's not they don't want to admit it, they don't actually know it's happening. As when obviously you don't necessarily know I have imposter syndrome, you don't necessarily come up with that sentence, but the actual, when you look into what imposter syndrome is, so many people have not all of it, but just elements of it. And we just feel like, do you notice that is, I guess from an HR point of view here, do you see that is, or can be, in your experience, a challenge that people face when they return back?
I think it is a challenge. I think we've started to have conversations about it in previous organisations I've worked in. It was something we'd started to have conversations about. But if I'm honest, I don't know how open people are. I haven't experienced that here with people returning from leave, and hadn't in the last few years in my prior role. Either that's because everybody that came back in was absolutely Superwoman or Superman and didn't have it, or what I think is probably more realistic is there's still a stigma to associated with talking about it and getting it out there.
Absolutely. I think as well, people that are coming back into work almost feel that they want to prove that they are still able, that they can still do it. And so they don't want to share with anybody they don't want to share their vulnerabilities in case it makes them look weak or any kind of less of an employee that they were before, and they don't want people to view them like that. And so I think the more people talk about it, again, as we said before, the the less people are likely to feel it as well, because they know actually it's really normal to feel like this, and actually after a few weeks it'll feel easier. Is there anything that you do in the company to put people, I guess, more at ease when they return back to work?
I can suggest something there. So I mean, on the subject of imposter syndrome, I am the queen of imposter syndrome, and anyone that's ever managed me will tell you that. And you know, we're discussing about kind of the growth of the practice at the moment, and I guess I've been a little bit hesitant to put my stake in the ground about what's next for my career. You know, I've been far more focused on, well, let's just remember how to spell my own name and do my day job before I think about domination. But actually, there are all sorts of things. So I was talking to our CPO, Mel, and she said, well, look, as soon as you're ready, we've got mentoring schemes. You guys have got a new mentoring scheme, haven't you, across the business?
We have, yeah.
A big cohort, and she said we could get you an external mentor. There's loads of things. They've got big training programs, development programs ongoing as well. So there are, if you are the kind of person, I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I find it quite easy to admit my vulnerabilities most of the time. If you're willing to admit that, then there's loads of options, I think, to get you back to where you want to be.
And that's fantastic. And as soon as more people like yourself are showing their vulnerabilities and are getting this help and the support they need, then actually I think a lot more people will follow suit, because they'll think, oh, actually it's not a bad thing for me to share what I'm feeling, and I'll get help.
I think it's also interesting because when we've spoken to working parents, going back to work is they don't want to admit any kind of having like the lack of confidence of having. But when we first have our babies, I don't know if you'll agree, but when you first have your baby, you're quite happy to admit your kind of imposter syndrome at being a mum. You're a bit like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, and you're quite happy to admit that, and you're the same person. But when you go back into the workplace, they're obviously, you don't want to ever say that sentence. Oh, I just don't even know what I'm doing, because you do know what you're doing, because obviously you've been doing it a long time. But I just think that cultural shift again, isn't it? Of you've got something to prove to yourself, you've got something to prove to other people, but we shouldn't have to prove anything. It should just be a natural process. But I guess we do that as humans, continuously doubt ourselves or try to kind of make sure we're, being the best that we can be. But sometimes, if you haven't had, I'm going to go back to our sleep thing, but if you haven't had like a good night's sleep, that can change your attitude on your day-to-day basis, or you've been up with a baby who's unwell, or what have you. That can also just make you feel that you have imposter syndrome just for that day, because you're feeling like lack of confidence, etc. So I think it's not necessarily always an imposter syndrome that happens to you at the beginning and that's it. It can happen throughout your kind of day-to-day stuff, depending on that balance act, and if that day things have been particularly hard at home, or vice versa, I suppose.
I think you're right. I think and Lily made a really good point about the mentoring scheme, which is up and running across the wider business, and which we're looking at specific to returning parents as well. I think having a touch point with somebody who has the experience of those days where you've had 2 hours sleep and you're still expected to come in and sell to a client or wow the board with a presentation will really help, and just being able to talk openly about the fact that on those days you do wonder if you can do it, despite having a year earlier or 6 months earlier or however nailed it, and probably it was second nature.
I think visibility, whether it's through mentoring or any other means, is just so important, right? So, and I say I wear my heart on my sleeve. There might be loads of colleagues in the business that would be really surprised to hear that I have, confidence issues and imposter syndrome sometimes. And I think it's really, really important to have people being visible, saying these things, like you said, just to make it less taboo and have, so that you can understand, okay, she feels like that too, or gosh, I thought it was just me. Important.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your opinion, what do you think is the key to ensuring good employee morale, or how do you best support well-being?
I think communication. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about openness and transparency. Or is my sound okay? It just,
Yeah.
Talking about openness and transparency, and I think that's really key. I talked also about individuality and that balance between having consistent policies or having a consistent toolkit or offering, but also respecting that everybody's different, everybody has different needs, and as a company we may not be able to accommodate all of those, but we can probably have a stab at accommodating some of them. And if you keep that conversation going, the employee feels valued and you get the best out of them, and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, I mean, we've talked about work-life balance and discipline and making sure that there is that delineation between work and home life. I think what I've seen done really well, activities that support togetherness. So we obviously work, you can be quite isolated now that we're all working remotely so often. So anything that brings people back together, whether it's virtually or not, I think is really important. So even things like charity days that just boost the team a little bit and get us working together. On the subject of wellbeing, I've seen great things in the past in terms of over and above initiatives. You know, obviously we have gym memberships and private medical, but extra things that might be done more on a local level. We used to have our office would pay for one free gym class a week for the office, and what was lovely was that we would choose ones that were local to the business park where we work. So not only were we doing some exercise, which was nice, it was an exercise in being together as well. So a group of us would go out, and then you have the bonding that comes with it. And we had nutritionist webinars and meditation seminars and stuff, and kind of over and above initiatives that just remind employees that they're valued, that their well-being is important. And it's not all just about the work.
I think our leadership team as well are key in living and breathing this. We do a engagement survey a couple of times a year, and we have a platform that runs the whole year through. And as part of that, we've got a facility for people to ask our CEO questions or give a piece of feedback. And when I joined, I was told this, and I was told that she read and answered each and every one of those. And I thought, are you kidding me? We've got thousands of employees. Surely this isn't possible. But I can tell you, after 6 months in the business, that is genuinely true. And she genuinely does look at every piece of feedback that comes in and want to understand how we're going to address it, or if we aren't able to address it, why not, and why things are as they are. And I think that's a really good value to have demonstrated right from the top.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes your organisation obviously
such a great place to work.
because whenever we've spoken to anyone there, when we were obviously working to develop the kind of client, it was we knew that it was the right fit, because as we said earlier, you want to help support people and want to make sure people are happy in the organisation. And I think that is, so important, that people actually care about you, which is such a silly sentence to say out loud and think that's not, but it unfortunately, there are so many organisations that don't do it as well. So,
there's a sound commercial business case to this as well. It's not just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You're going to be retaining people. Attrition is really, really expensive. You're going to have people who are more productive and want to do a good job for you. It just makes sense.
Exactly.
Completely agree.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you both for coming and giving up your time today, because it's obviously really interesting to speak to other people in the organisation and look at how we can move forward as well. But yeah, we really appreciate it, and it's been really interesting to hear what you both have to say.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.